There has just been a major announcement that will affect schools and students across the province. Education Minister Stephen Lecce is tightening policies around cell phone use in Ontario schools. Have a listen.
We will be denying cell phone use during instructional time. For our youngest learners in kindergarten to grade 6 who may have phones, they will now be required to keep phones on silent and out of sight for the duration of the day. They, of course, can be permitted to use phones at lunch, for example. However, they must receive explicit consent from their teacher or the school staff. Now, for our older kids in grade 7 and up, they will be required to turn off their mobile devices or set them on silent mode, keep them out of sight when they're in the classroom. And if they do not comply, they will be asked to surrender their phones or they could be sent to the office. Our policy on cell phones is quite simple. The default this September, unless explicitly directed by their educator, for a child is out of sight, out of mind when it comes to cell phones in Ontario.
Lecce also announced restrictions around social media and vaping. Let's bring in CBC's Albert Delatala for more on all of this. So, Albert, you were listening in to the full press conference there. Take us through how this is going to work.
Well, one area that's getting a lot of attention are those changes around phones, further restrictions on their use. And let's break it down. Students in kindergarten to grade 6, they'll now be required to keep them on silent throughout the day and out of sight. Meanwhile, grade 7 to 12, they won't be permitted in class at all. And in both of those cases, the only exception will be if teachers explicitly say that they are allowed in class. Explaining the move, the government says that internal polling shows that most adults believe that more restrictions are needed when it comes to kids' cell phone use in class. Here's the Education Minister, Stephen Lecce, earlier talking about why they're making this change now.
Every parent and teacher we speak to has shared the growing problem of cell phone distractions in class during instructional time, in addition to the disturbing rise of vaping in schools amongst our youth. Students acknowledge this reality too. We need to be bold, we need to be comprehensive, and we need to act with urgency today as we restore focus and safety and common sense back into our school system.
Those restrictions announced today, they follow a less restrictive ban announced back in 2019 by the province. Other bans across the country include in Quebec, which banned phones for the most part as of January, except for educational purposes. They're allowed in those cases. And BC has plans to ban phones this fall, or at least to restrict their use more than they are now. Ahead of today's announcement, the Director for Education at the Thames Valley District School Board in London, Ontario, he expressed cautious support for the then expected changes.
Yeah, they can be used in effective ways to support educational opportunities. But schools now have class sets of Chromebooks. They have other resources available for students, and not every student can afford a cell phone. So I do recognize, I do support the intentionality behind banning cell phone usage.
Ontario also announced today that social media sites, they'll be blocked on all school networks and devices as well. And there will also be a section on report cards that actually assesses the level of distraction that students that they experience in class. And a third major point announced today regarding classrooms, vape devices will now be banned in schools and school-related settings, along with cannabis, nicotine, and tobacco products. If students are caught using those products, they'll have to surrender them immediately, and their parents will also be immediately notified. In addition to that, the government says that it's spending $30 million on vape detectors and other security devices, and those will be added to schools, they say, in the coming months.
Okay, some big announcements there for students and schools as well. Albert, thanks so much for the details. This is CBC's Albert Delatala in our newsroom.